Welcome to IT Origins, an interview series from Gestalt IT. I'm your inquisitor, Rich Straffolino. Each Thursday, we post new interviews from IT engineers, entrepreneurs, and executives to find out how they got started on their path to IT. This week, I had the privilege to talk to data architect and space enthusiast, Karen Lopez. A quick production note: for some reason, Skype decided to make it sound like I was recording in a cathedral in space. So my audio is a little funky. Luckily, you're not here for me, and Karen sounds great. So Karen, what's your IT origin story? How long have you been in the field, and how'd you get your start?
That's a great question to start with. So officially I tell people I've been in the field for 20 plus years, but it's actually more than 30 years. I just stopped counting at 20. And there's a lot of IT people who got into it via, a degree in computing and then going into it. But I found that in my specialization in the data world, there's a significant percentage of people who didn't do that. But I'm one that did. So I studied data and database systems and information systems at Purdue. And then right after that, went into defense consulting, working on building system engineering systems.
And then, so in that time, what's been the biggest change kind of in the data world? I mean, that seems like an impossible question, given that everything is data-centric now, or we like to claim it is. But can you give me some sense of that?
So one of the interesting things is that while I was in university, the relational database world was brand new, and so new that Ted Codd was writing his papers and scoring the vendors who were producing new relational database systems and giving them a score of 1 out of 10 or 0 out of 10. I think one vendor got 2 or something like that. So that was a big change then that the industry, like the enterprise industry, was trying to wade through, and as were vendors. And then we fast forward to now, and I've equated sort of the NoSQL movement or the post-SQL movement as being a same sort of shift in database technology. So I won't say that, that NoSQL is the shift. The real shift is, it took decades, even though there were lots of other database formats that came and that were successful. Now that I've been through 2 of these very large changes, I would say that data practices have stayed somewhat stable. It's the technology and sort of the how we persist the data that's had the most innovation. So I guess I'm answering kind of the opposite question. Data has stayed the same, like the philosophy of data has stayed primarily the same, and it's the sort of advent of cloud and NoSQL that has changed how we persist it.
In terms of where we are with NoSQL, is that at the same level when you first started with relational databases in terms of being at that like 1 to 2 out of 10 level?
Well, so that one's harder to say because when we went to relational technologies, Dr. Codd wrote his paper and, of these new systems, and that started, that was a theory that and a sort of a new model for storing data, whereas NoSQL isn't really a thing. It's just, originally started as not relational. That was why they called it NoSQL or NoSQL, I should even say. But, NoSQL, just like big data, it's not really one thing. What I think is that the big revelation was I believe that NoSQL became popular because it came about at about the same time as cloud technologies as well as open source software being a mainstream enterprise ready set of technologies. I think all that came together. I call it the perfect storm of database systems, new database models plus cloud plus open source that allowed us to get where we are now.
And I noticed you're careful to say NoSQL. Is there particular significance behind that?
Yeah, and this has also changed through the decades as well. But I find that in today's world, most people take the pronunciation of SQL and associate with Microsoft and SQL Server. And then SQL is primarily used for the non-Microsoft technologies. Not everyone follows that. Because I work with a lot of the Microsoft data platform stuff, I tend to say SQL a lot and then get caught up in it. But even when you go to the vendors that have the letters SQL in their product, I've tried to nail them down. Do you have an official statement on that? And almost everyone has said, yeah, we don't care. We just want you to talk about our product.
There's no bad publicity, right? All right, so current worst trend in IT right now.
Man. Does it count as a trend if I say data breaches?
You're allowed to, yes. We've I think net neutrality has also, or like the lack of net neutrality or the death of net neutrality has been considered the worst. So we can allow data breaches.
Okay. So yeah, I should go with net neutrality as well. But I'm much more fearful and worried about data breaches. I mean, right now in the news today, there's the Panera Bread story that's been just going crazy this week about, researchers found, like, to call it a vulnerability is just silly because it was just wide open data, most of it unencrypted, hanging out on a web accessible page. And the story is that they were told 8 months ago. Oh, and geez. Nothing was done until Krebs got involved. And even then, this retailer is still harassing the researchers and treating people with disrespect. And there's some other news that I haven't quite verified that allegedly the security officer also used to work for Experian. So let's say not a good track record.
Yeah. To say the least, yeah.
To say the least. But what really worries me is, like, I guess we as an industry, it doesn't seem to matter, especially in North America, or maybe I should say especially in the U.S., that these reports of vulnerabilities aren't being treated as serious issues. And I'm not for public disclosure of vulnerabilities until there's been notification. I mean, I think vulnerabilities should be kept private until you can notify the data stewards, the people who are holding on to that data, so that people don't exploit it as much. But finding that line of how long do you wait before you out people, and it's just people are collecting data, and I've had IT people tell me it's not my job to care about it, and I think it is. I think it's every person's in the organization's job to care about protecting the data, but I'm so confident that it's every IT person's job.
Well, what's interesting about what I've seen from the this Panera news that just came out today, even going into, I thought it was very interesting with the whole Cambridge Analytica story. I think it was Vice that was refusing to call it a data breach versus data disclosure or data selling or something like that. And I think these all fall under the rubric of data exposure versus a breach makes it sound like there's some hacker with numbers displayed across their face from an old CRT or something in a hoodie, but it's an unencrypted bucket or something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I do consider the Panera thing a data breach. I don't consider the sort of Facebook CA thing as a breach. It was, I guess as a data, as someone who probably had my data sold that way, I feel that my data privacy has been breached. But, from a technical point of view, it was literally data sharing. And I think one of the things that U.S. organizations are struggling with is that there's no, single data privacy, data protection legislation like other countries have, like in Canada where I live. But I don't know if Canada's data protection laws would have protected against that whole use of the data. And likely we all said, yeah, this is fine. We agree to this because no one reads the user acceptance words anymore.
Yeah, well, when some of them are, 60, 100 pages or something like that. Famously, Apple's is impossible to read. All right, so let's maybe turn away from the worst trends, and what do you think is the best trend right now in IT?
Um, Gosh, everything has such buzzwords now. I don't know how to phrase it. I mean, for me, what's been interesting and what I've been playing with mostly is, the whole cloud technologies thing. And I don't just, maybe I should rephrase that as software as a service or infrastructure as a service. And so even though almost all those are in the cloud or at least on the internet, for me, it's been just to have that accessibility of to be able to easily get my hands on technology that I would have put off in the past because I would have had to have downloaded an installer, which might have meant having to talk to a salesperson to get a trial or to wait several days while I'm pre-qualified or have to justify that. To be able to just play with a service by using credits or using my credit card. For me personally, it's been that. And I've always wondered, how that is for enterprise customers when they want to do fast proofs of concept. So software and infrastructure as a service, that has been mind-blowing for me.
Well, it's very interesting because I know in some discussions we've had with companies that accessibility has caused the problem of shadow IT, I guess is the buzzword around it, where it is so easy that someone in the application team can just take the company credit card, spin up some servers on AWS, and all of a sudden no one knows. Well, that leads to a whole other data problem, on top of that of not knowing where the data is.
That's the trade-off, right? But I used to explain to my developers that when I started 30 some years ago, how did you learn DB2 or Oracle? I mean, there was no internet. You couldn't download it and run it on some desktop that you had in your home. I mean, you had virtually no accessibility to technology unless you worked for a technology vendor or you worked at a company where you were, given that authorization to evaluate or play with any technology. So I get that trade-off, but I think in the overall scheme of things, where we are is for the good, and what we really need is better governance for implementing systems and moving data around. And I know that's an anti-agile, anti-scrum process, but I think that's the difference between being an enterprise organization or a software vendor organization or a startup.
Yeah, I think a lot of those issues come down to the newness of everything and maybe not realizing that there are best practices beyond just grabbing the company credit card for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of backing up a little bit, I'm interested in some of your approaches to organization, kind of productivity. Do you have a particular way that you like to work? Any kind of must-use apps that you use on a daily basis? I just kind of want to dig into process a little bit here.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So many of my projects are remote teams, so people across several time zones and everything. So, I mean, I'm not going to say anything that's going to be revolutionary here, but collaboration environments, I think because I'm a project manager and I specialize in troubled projects, which means that there's a lot of stress. There hasn't been collaboration. There are people who aren't working together anymore or maybe never did who are now being forced to work together. I mean, it's things like Skype and GoToMeeting and having that access to work with people on a regular basis in something other than email. So maybe my number one recommendation is that too many people try to do work via email, sending documents around. And this is probably my data bent. I want to share a document. I don't want to send it around and have people updating the wrong version. And maybe that means that GitHub has been a great productivity tool. Now that it's being used for things other than code, for documents, for presentations, for PowerPoint decks, whatever it is, between that and a shared to-do list or a shared project tracking thing, whatever project task list that one uses, the key word to all of this is shared for getting stuff done.
All right, and any book recommendations out there for other IT pros? And what are you reading right now?
That's a well. So my number one recommended book for all people of the world is a book by Gerald Weinberg or Jerry Weinberg called Secrets of Consulting. But it's not a consulting book really, because it's subtitled something like The Art of Giving and Receiving Advice. And it's told in a bunch of parables that explain a concept, and they're literally stories with characters, and they have names like the orange juice test and the laws of truth. And it's really a great sort of primer on how to interact with people. There's a little bit about interacting with clients, but you could translate clients into family members or coworkers easily on that. That's my number one recommended book for everybody. Because it talks about one of the things that Gerald Weinberg writes about is everything's always a people problem, not from a blame point of view, but you're going to trace the problem back to a person in order to figure out how to fix the problem or to get the people to fix the problem, even if they weren't the cause of it. So every problem's a people problem. And if we come into challenges with that sort of mindset, we realize that, maintaining relationships with people doesn't mean you have to be friends with everyone, but treating people with respect and having a information sharing and collaborative mindset is really important. And then, for data books, I'm into data modeling, so I have a recommended data modeling book that has a blazing title of Data Modeling Essentials by Graham Simpson and Graham Witt. And that helps people understand the nature of data.
All right, and first computer you ever owned?
First computer I ever owned. I'm sure it was some compact desktop. It probably cost $4,000. I don't remember the config. I remember I bought it because it was being offered by one of my clients to their employees to encourage employees to have home computers, which was really rare at that time. And it was, and the company had negotiated for I think they have something like 10,000 employees. They had negotiated this buying program where it was a little bit more affordable and came with all the right accessories and had the same desktop productivity software that the company used because they wanted their employees to get used to using that desktop software. And I thought that was kind of a brilliant thing. It didn't cost the company any money because they just negotiated based on their office purchases of hardware. And it, helped the company build up computer literacy skills amongst all their workers. But I have to say, the first computer I used on a regular basis was, of course, a TRS-80, because a friend of mine's brother had it, because pretty much at that time you had to be a boy to be allowed to have a computer, I think. But I got to play with that. And then a friend of mine in high school, he had one of those, and so I got to play it. My high school had no computing devices because I'm old.
What was the what was the first? I'm always curious about this. What was the first kind of whoa moment, in terms of an application that you used that I don't know, either convinced you that, hey, this PC thing's catching on, or kind of changed your perspective on what computing could do?
Oh. So it was probably
a big question.
That's probably pre-PC days, right? See, I'm experienced. So, I had used those the TRS-80s before, but my mom, she's brilliant. She sent me during the summer to take a programming class at the local university. And so that was probably some mid-range computer. I wouldn't have known as a high school student what it was for sure, but I remember we learned programming, and we had to build a system actually in programming that did inventory control and accounting, which is all really, really boring stuff for me. Everyone else was learning programming by building interactive games or something like that. Most of the high school students that I knew that got outside programming courses, they were making what was the equivalent of a chatbot always, right? Not quite as smart, with a bunch of if statements. But I think that was the mind-blowing thing, that computers weren't just something that kept track of stuff, but that you had to focus on human interaction. I think I was really lucky that the instructor I had at that university really talked a lot about how do you make technology work for the people, not the other way around. And that was what made me decide that it wasn't just sitting around typing and the logic of programming, but that there was a design factor to it.
All right, and what are you doing, Karen, when you're not working in IT or data?
I've heard that people have times like that. Well, I'm a wannabe runner, which means I run and not enough, so that it's always painful. But my real sort of hobby slash obsession is space and space exploration. So I participate with space agencies around the world, either doing social media coverage or influencing. And I'm also a NASA data naut, which means there are groups of people, there are classes, intake classes every 6 months, and I'm a mentor to the program now, where people either learn to code, or lately they've been very experienced people that are joining these intakes. And they are people who work with NASA Open Data to help NASA have another set of eyes, or to think through problems using things like data science or data visualization or data inventory or metadata programs, to help NASA think about other ways they might work with or derive value from their data.
That is like the coolest outside of work thing I've ever heard. That's really awesome.
Yeah, and it's perfect for me because I have this space exploration passion and a data passion. It's just perfect.
All right, and how do you caffeine if you do?
If I do. Constantly. So coffee's my thing. And actually, I was just looking this week for a siphon coffee maker. And I have to decide whether I would just break it in the first couple of days. So I like trying all kinds of different things. And there was a discussion going on Twitter today or this week, because I was looking at those. I normally French press my desk coffee, I call it, which is mostly medicinal. That's so I can make it extra strong. But I use an AeroPress to make a cup of coffee while I'm waiting for my French press coffee to be ready.
And have you ever? Do you have a lot of experience with siphon coffee? Those are the ones that look like a chemistry titration set, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't. So a friend of mine, he makes his own concentrated vacuum coffee, and his apartment looks like a meth lab because it's for bulk scale. And he makes this super concentrated coffee that you're supposed to dilute down with other fluids, and I don't. And he has all these names like Death Wish, like Death by Caffeine. I can't remember now. I should be able to plug his stuff. But it's always intrigued me that I want one. And most of them that you can find, they have an alcohol burner underneath, but that just sounds, again, unsafe for me. And I want one that I can use on my stovetop, so that, I don't know, because I would run out of, I would probably spend more buying the alcohol burners than just the electricity. But I've heard great things about it, and then I've tried my friends' products, and they're wonderful.
That's what I love about coffee, is that no matter how much you get into it, there's still an entire world out there that makes you feel bad about how you're preparing your coffee.
Yeah, and I'm really bad because I'm so addicted to it. And I think also because I travel a lot and keep weird hours. That's why it really is my desk coffee, as I call it. Like right now it's sitting on a warmer, and I will heat it up several times, which, no real coffee snob would ever do. But I also enjoy a very well prepared coffee, like, where people do it right. So I enjoy both. The only thing that's worse is airline or hotel coffee that's free.
I don't know. Like if you're getting on a plane at like 4 a.m., I'll still take the the boiling hot a cup of bean flavored water
Yes,
if I need
and
to.
even though they tell you don't drink that, water on planes is awful and they don't get it hot enough to take care of anything. Yes, I will. But I did learn from traveling. I mean, there are places in the world where they enjoy their coffee, but they enjoy it very little, which means that you might get a quarter of a cup of heavily milk and sugar coffee, which does not have enough caffeine. So I travel with caffeine pills just in case, because there's nothing worse than trying to make it through a day jet lagged and not having caffeine.
All right, Karen, who would you like to see answer the IT origins questions next?
Oh, well, see, I don't know who you've done before.
I mean, no big names. Steve Wozniak. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I will take repeats. It doesn't matter. We just want to know who you are interested in hearing from. I can then plug the episode if we've already interviewed them to you.
Gosh, so many people. Now I'm going to try to think of something off the regular trail. Okay, so there's a great woman that I met at a conference. Her name's Amelia Eastwick, and she's got a great security data protection presentation, and she comes about it from her former military experience and also work that she did at national security agencies in the U.S., and she's fantastic to talk to. I think you should talk to her if she were willing to do that. But as far as if I wanted to name a celebrity person, just because I like to do that as well, there are astronauts that started in IT. So one I met recently at IBM, he used to be an IBM software engineer and also a product manager, and then he went to space, and now he just speaks at conferences and works at a NASA center at NASA Ames. I think you should try to talk to him.
I just want to say, and then he went to space is like the best way to gloss over a part of someone's career. Like I wish at some point that would be said of me, but sadly,
exactly, exactly, like Wolowitz on The Big Bang.
Exactly. And finally, best career advice you've received.
Okay, I don't know if it counts as career. Always ask for more. So if you're negotiating and someone makes you an offer, you should always ask for more. And not just because you'll get more money almost all the time. Like 98% of the time, you'll get more just by asking for more, but because people respect you more. So this actually comes from The Secret of Consulting from Jerry Weinberg's book. He says, the more they pay you, the more they respect you. Totally unfair life observation, but it's true.
Words to live by, Karen. We're going to get out of here. Karen, where can people find more of your stuff if they want to check your work out?
Okay, so I blog at datamodel.com, but I tweet a lot, and I'm Data Chick on Twitter, and I tweet about space, I tweet about data, I tweet about real life things, and I also tweet about career advice.
Excellent. So find her on Twitter at DataChick. She's a great follow. I can verify this personally. So Karen, this has been a pleasure, and thank you so much for being on IT Origins.
Thank you.